just basic, white guys copying, old-time American guitar blues. There's nothing original about it. There's nothing original about it.
There's a very good reason. There's a good reason for that, though, because remember, you see, the U.S. tried to get, when they set up all these camps across the U.S. and so on, to train the youth from top universities to become future leaders for the Marxist system and neo-Trotsky system that was to be blended with the West, basically, which has happened. Through the acoustic era, they tried, what they were hoping for inside the U.S. was to get the black population to do an uprising. And so that they popularized what they call black music. In fact, that's how they trained initially Bob Dylan. He's from New York, remember? Not from New York, but he's not from the Deep South.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, and so for years and years, he had to practice this kind of pseudo-nasal kind of back in your throat singing that was kind of, what is he? Is he from Mississippi or where? And they did the same thing in Britain with the Rolling Stones. Here's a guy, again, who was trained as an economist, Mick Jagger, and he's put out there with his outfit, his shtick and so on, and his drugged look, and the image is immediately put out as he's a star before anyone had really listened to his song. A massive machinery went into action, but he had to sing again. They used to call him the Deep South Londoner, because that's the accent they tried to give him to popularize the black music. Well, when they found out in the 60s and after some riots they had in parts of New York by the blacks who were against what was happening, they were getting used, as many of the leaders caught on to by the Communist Party USA, then the party changed its tactics and brought in the rock stuff, and then they thought, well, that would do, and we'll sing it it's like a renegade kind of white man for a change, and then they started that. And after that, I was there when they changed the image from the heavy rock bands to the new narcissistic system, the long hair, very well groomed long hair, cleaner looking, very tight, fashionable but expensive clothing, a bit stupid looking, even the leotards and all that, to change the whole image of the man until he became more effeminate. And that was really what the push was about. Until many of the bands who were forming at that time were actually recruited guys who were homosexual. That was well known in the industry, and you met straight guys who couldn't get in. They were excellent musicians and top guitarists and so on, and keyboard players, but they couldn't get in because that's what the image they wanted to push, and so on, before they came out with all the punk. So every stage of this has been well managed, and then when you find this Communist Party is totally in cahoots with the powers in the West. Remember the Rees Commission that they had in the US in the 1950s to find out why the big foundations like the Rockefeller foundations and all the other ones were funding what appeared to them, to the government, to be far left parties, communistic parties, and Norman Dodds, who was sent out there from the Congress, the U.S. Congress, published in his own book. He says, I met the chairman of the Ford Foundation, and he says, we take our orders right from the White House, he says, and the goal is eventually to change, so drastically and radically change the culture of the West to that of the Soviet Union. There'll be a merger between the two down the road. With complete different social system, a different cultural system. And remember, the communist system was total central government and authoritarianism. Well, that's what we have today. The appearance of a kind of freedom, but it's all artificial and given to you because you're copying singers or stars or whatever it happens to be. And lots of entertainment to choose from, but you're actually got a massive centralized government which is becoming more and more authoritarian all the time. It wasn't just for the US, it was for Canada, Britain, and the rest of Europe and so on. So long-term geopolitical strategy, and to do so, you had to alter the cultures into a now unified culture which will not stand up because the people cannot bond the same way they used to. They don't have the same values. They don't have even this. Well, I used to call it ancestor worship. When you look back at, say, your hometown before they demolished them and built skyscrapers or whatever, that was where your grandfather walked along this road here, or he went down this little stream there and fished, and his great-grandfather before. And so you had this continuity. Today, the continuity had to be destroyed. So a building's up 10 years sometime and then knock it down again. So there's nothing to relate to between one generation to the next. This was all part of this massive strategy. You know, thousands and thousands of think tanks working on different parts of it, and millions of pages written, professional pages for professionals to learn and how to implement this whole strategy. But going back to even Plato's day, Plato talks about the culture industry. He called it the industry in the translation from the Greek. And that included drama, and not just the architecture too, but drama. Drama was licensed back then, and the traveling troops were authorized to come out and do certain authorized plays in different city-states across the ancient Greece. They had so many islands, thousands of islands, and everyone had to, by law, attend them. Even the slaves had to go and watch them, because they said that's where the youth are going to get their morals, for a strong morality, a continuity of culture, and a continuity of control. Plato even says that musicians should be licensed because they have the ability to stir up the youth to rebellion, with the emotional impact of music, coupling with right kind of words and so on, and themes. So this is a very old tradition. We're taught at school, we just evolve through generation to generation, and things just happen. That's the accidental view of history. And nothing's further from the truth. The 20th century into the 21st century were to be where all sciences over people, all sciences were to come to the fore and rule on behalf of the dominant minority of the wealthy financial families. So scientific control is what this is all about. And you must always grab culture completely and you direct it where it's to go.
Yeah. Thomas, Alan's said many times that you can't help liking the music, and he just mentioned the scientific aspect to that. And there are bands supposedly out there telling us how it is. Muse come to mind, although I'm not a fan of theirs at all. But there are smaller ones like Killing Joke and even smaller Anti-Flag and people like that. Thomas, do you think there are any bands out there at all who are for real?
Not famous ones, I don't think. And if they are, they always get co-opted. I mean, the whole punk rock thing was supposed to be about anarchy. And within no time, you had like this Clash Sandinistas and, wearing T-shirts with Brigade Rosse on it, the Italian Red Brigade, who were basically a communist group that were created by Propaganda Due, the Vatican Freemasonry. You had like the Red Wedge things. You had someone like Paul Weller, who actually didn't really come out from a political stance in the beginning, ends up, hanging out for a while with people like Neil Kinnock and Billy Bragg. I mean, hardcore Marxists. Although, to be fair, he did pull himself out and said that it was all a con that he was led into. But this whole thing of constantly steering into Marxism, it always has to go with Marx. It's always some kind of Marxist endgame in all this stuff, whether it's pop music or visual arts, or even like within alternatives, this scene we have now, Russell Brand steering them all back into Marxism again. It's always, I've often found it interesting at 33 revolutions per minute for an LP, and he's telling us something there. But it's always frustrating to see someone that enters the music business that may have something to say, and then it's gone. It's whipped off into fluff nonsense or into the Marxist thing. I mean, I actually think that the stuff about, like, even bands like U2, yeah, they're a big corporate machine now. They're a big establishment machine. But I've seen interviews if people go back and look at old interviews of the likes of Bono on their early American tours, they're really, really ripping into the establishment to a surprising level. Next thing you know, they're being put on their blues phrase, their blues thing, and then the next thing you know, they're playing for presidents. It's almost like what Bill Hicks said about when somebody gets elected, that they take it to the President of the United States, that they take him into a room behind the Oval Office and they showed them what really happened in Dealey Plaza that day, the JFK. It's the same thing with the music business. You may have integrity, you may have the right feel, the right drive in your soul. But there's a certain point where you get to, and it's as clear as day, and where you get what was his name? Bob Dylan again said it to Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes. I made a deal with the devil, the biggest, baddest guys of them all. And that's what happens. You're given, like in the mafia, like any kind of criminal cartel, you're given an offer you can't refuse.
Yeah, I've actually got...
And along with these offers, too, along these offers come... Hello?
Sorry, carry on, Alan, carry on.
Yeah, I was going to say that along with the offers, I mean, it isn't just financial or doors opening for you, or things being taken care of you, like lawsuits that would come your way that get deflected away altogether, things like that. You also get superior health care that's not available to anybody in the general public. You can get up to the higher levels of things like that. Life extension, to an extent, you might call it. That's why they live so long. But so there's many different things that they're given as it comes their way. But when you go into who they put out to get this whole thing really kicked off in the 60s, this new, more organized, systematic technique they were using, well planned in with the Pentagon involved and so on. If you go into even Morrison, there always been a big deal about Morrison and Doors and so on. When the ships in the Gulf of Tonkin and the U.S. Warships were supposedly had possibly had torpedoes fired at them, this was the con that got the war started. You see, they wanted a war. The Navy Admiral in charge was Admiral George Stephen Morrison. That was his father. You'll find if you go through the top guys they put out, they really kicked this off. Every one of them's father was deep into high up in the Pentagon. Frank Zappa's dad himself was up in the top military establishment for chemical and biological warfare. They were all, even Madonna. You know, they came out and said, I turned up in New York or London or something with a pair of ballet shoes and $5, up to rubbish, because her brother came out and says, no, our dads we got a long military family, that's where we all came from, high up in the Pentagon. So this is a standard thing. So many of them are actually picked and groomed very early for their acting role as leaders of the culture industry, because you put out the leaders there, you debase the morality even more, and all these young fans, especially women, will start copying Madonna, and then they bring out later on Gaga and the rest of them and so on, and just push the envelope step by step. This is all planned before they even picked Madonna, that you get right down to Gaga. I'm sure even the names were picked before they even picked out Gaga. This is how detailed and well organized all of this system is.
Yeah. It always amazed me too how, if, like you said, that they are picked from the right families. In the case of Jim Morrison, there's a photograph of him as a clean-cut youth on the bridge of his father's battleship, literally months before he ends up as this long-haired rebel. Very, very strange transition in such a short time. He goes from like straight-laced army brat to rock god, Dionysian sex god overnight. That was always been a very weird one to me. Another thing too, and also, is that I was just going to say, if you don't come from those families, they have a tendency to kill you off. They don't want genuine people with talent working, like they say, with talent and ability who are popular. They seem to have a very high mortality rate.
That's right. Yeah, and Zappa himself too was groomed and given lots of TV spots, again in a suit and tie, when he was about 13, 14, 15, 16. Every year he was given little TV spots and silly little shows, just to get him used to the audience and managing himself in front of people and so on. But suit and tie, short haircut, the whole thing. So this is standard stuff, yeah.
And David Bowie as well. He was a regular on American shows like the Donna Show, and so was Alice Cooper. And they were supposed to be countercultures, and here they were entrenched with Bing Crosby in the very heart of the American entertainment establishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And even you start Bowie off. I mean, Bowie started off with the Traveling Roadshow. This thing had about 6 or 7 tractor trailers, these massive American-type trailers, doing his tours with all the incredible... No one had that back then. That the cost of it alone and the transportation of it all, and the hundreds of technicians all involved. That's how they launched him. And he comes on the stage dressed in a little pouch for his, nothing else on, dressed up and got with paints all over his face, and he's down on his knees on stage, and everybody was shocked, saying, "What the hell is this?" And who really launched him? The BBC did it again. They did massive shows on his roadshow all along to make sure it was launched, and to launch this new. He's a new kind of male. He's not quite this or not quite that. What is he? And going back even further, to set up again step by step. They started it off with Elvis Presley. And Elvis Presley was taught how they call him Elvis the pelvis. Get the pelvis going. A really disgusting thing at that era, at that time. Nothing today because we're so debased. But and he was trained by the same guy, and the same guy who controlled the whole group, Johnny Cash, all of them. They made them all stars as one man. And the same thing happened in Britain. At the time, you had Cliff Richard under the one guy. There was a guy called Brown as well. He did a few songs in different ones. They had the same technique with a small clique in every country, all in communication with each other, who knew the techniques, who were given a complete authority of the establishment and the governments to launch these people into the new culture. Yeah.
I suppose we had Tom Jones, of course, in Britain, who was a kind of a counter to Elvis Presley for British folk, I guess.
Yeah, and they launched him as a descendant of a miner, which was nonsense.
When Elvis Presley appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, the publicity machine made an enormous deal out of the fact that the camera couldn't show below his midriff.
Yeah,
they only showed the top. Now that was to deliberately generate this, as you were talking about earlier on, this idea of the forbidden fruit. The young people want to see the bottom half of Elvis. And so they deliberately create the forbidden fruit in order to attract people towards it. They're very deep. Well, we're talking about psychopaths.
Absolutely. Always make it bad. You must make it naughty and bad, you see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's the Sex Pistols in a nutshell, isn't it? Ban them from every public venue, and then everybody wants to see them.
Yeah.
Another one for me is this dissociation kind of thing they use very much in this, the idea of like Aurelian Newspeak in these cultural memes. You have all these Vietnam War movies that were made after the war was made, and they always show the American troops walking in slow motion through the jungle to ironically, it's always an anti-war protest song. Rock song, this kind of like by some band like Creedence Clearwater Revival,
right.
Or a Marvin Gaye song. So you have this association of the anti-war kind of rock anthem being used as a promotional film to glamorize war. When you have Charlie Sheen and people like that walking in slow motion through the jungle while they're playing something by Jefferson Airplane. You have the dichotomy of the two together that causes a kind of a psychic dissociation in people, where people now who are into that music now believes that it's somehow cool because you're in the army marching to a song that's against war. It's total Frankfurt School stuff. Yeah.
They've actually put out documentaries. They put documentaries out now. And I think they even use them in recruitments, but it's from actual footage of guys inside the armoured military vehicles that are really racing across the desert, and it's got this heavy metal music in the background, whoa, 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 and they're all tough, and and you create what you want. It's so easy to, if you have the power and influence in society, to create the kind of special areas like troops or whatever it is that you actually want. And you also have a culture within the country that will emulate that too. You see that with the rap music. You had years of the promotion, by the way. Blacks didn't promote this stuff from the top. If the culture industry did not want that stuff to get pushed out there, you never heard of it. But they pushed it from the very, very top. The whole culture industry did at the very top. And then you end up, kill cops, all this stuff. And then you start getting this happening. And you see where it is today. This is all to get the dissension, the tension built up inside the US. Therefore, they want a time when there will be definitely riots, combined with economic problems too, etc., to bring in again the next part of the new society. There's no doubt about that at all in my mind. Yeah.
When they split up the African American family in the United States, they brought out songs like Papa Was a Rolling Stone to entrench the idea that Daddy will never be home. And so they grow up with this culture of listening to the song Papa Was a Rolling Stone, you know, that kind of thing, where he laid his hat was his home. And so you grow up believing that, like, if you're an African American youth in Detroit or New York or New Jersey or whatever, you actually grow up believing, well, Daddy's not home because I'm aware of a song called Papa Was a Rolling Stone. And then they try to make out, oh, it's a statement of the times. No, it's not. It's predictive programming.
Yes, it is. Yep, that's cool. And why get a job and try to get some self-respect? Never mind other people's respect. Get self-respect in a way that's not going to harm you or other people and actually benefit you and give you a bit of peace as well, rather than to get self-respect inside a gang because you're the coolest dude and baddest dude there is. But that's what's been promoted for years now, and that was all deliberately, because it wasn't white men that promoted the rap, believe you me. It's not blacks that control the culture industry. But it was a white men that pushed all this, and I say white, and there's more things involved in that too that tend to lead the culture industry as well within it.
Yeah, they're the aristocrats.
Well, in terms of like black music in general, I mean, if we go back to the old image of the black congregations in the churches, I mean, was that like a purely good thing? Was that a genuine kind of thing that went on, and then that had to be co-opted because it was actually like the foundation of the local communities? I mean, we've gone from there to gangster rap. I mean, gangster rap's got to be the most pernicious.
You're dead on.
You're dead on. Here's what they came out with. They came out with this in the 60s, again, from the Communist Party USA. In their own writings, if you go back, you'll find all this stuff. And they talked about they couldn't get the blacks to revolt because of this how they held on strongly to this, what was to them traditional Christianity and gospel music and so on. That was holding them back. They couldn't get them to completely revolt, so they've simply tried to eliminate all of that. Get the young women. See, it was mainly that their mums and so on who always kept that tradition of Christianity and here's how it should, right and wrong and so on. And so if they get the young women to be ultra promiscuous as well, that's why you had the MTV, you know, promoting the dancers that were pretty well humping each other on stage, you know, in front of the camera. That's really what it was all simulating. Then get the young women into it too, bring in an atheistic culture, and then you control them completely. That's been awfully successful. Yeah.
Well, what they called those gospels, what they used to call them Negro spirituals. That was basically the whole song body of songs by the likes of Pete Seeger and Peter, Paul, and Mary. All they did was take those old Southern church songs and put them on a really namby-pamby acoustic guitar version, and suddenly, in one fell swoop, the whole tradition of indigenous and natural and organic Black American gospel music, bang, it's gone.
I mean,
That's right.
Could we say the same thing about the traditional black blues musicians who were actually singing about kind of their own lives as such?
Oh yeah, look, there was that piss take that they made of the Beatles, the Ruttles, that Eric Idle made. All you need is cash. There's a very funny but very telling scene in it. He goes, "Here I am in Louisiana, the home of the blues, and music written by black people, played almost exclusively by whites." And that was really, you know, it was a satirical, funny way of looking at it. Absolutely, all these things like Irish and Scottish and English folk music, the spirituals in America, or the blues, they were all rooted in real organic musical traditions that bonded communities together, that spoke of people's pain, that spoke of people's their desires in life to transcend the situation they were in. And every single last one of them, you know, you look at like Irish folk music, it's ended up with Michael Flatley on a stage with about 100 girls in short skirts dancing around them. You have the spiritual stuff is all rappers now have that. Well, they're rapping about, like, you know, what they're going to do to their hoe and stuff like that. You have like these kind of spiritual gospel singing in the background, And folk music, well, that was destroyed years ago. I mean, even bands like the Pogues, I mean, I never got the appeal of them. They just took Irish folk music and just basically just played it directly as it is and added this sort of drunken element to it to always keep the idea of the Irishman as being this hapless drunk. You know, this stupid drunk. And if you look at them, they were all people like Shane MacGowan, the leader of the Pogues, was an English public school boy. Mm-hmm. And here he was playing the professional drunken Paddy on stage.
Yeah, you remember too that even during the 70s, they were bringing guys in from wealthy families, very wealthy families, Oxford and Cambridge and so on, who decided because their dads were so powerfully and rich and well connected, they wanted to be rock stars, and they were teaching them how to speak in Cockney, the Cockney accent, the London accent. To try to get the image, and that they were successful with quite a few of them, actually. Well, naturally with the money behind them and a bit of acting lessons and so on. Plus, if you mime pretty good and get other people to sing for you or even play for you, and a lot of that's happened, by the way, too. I've played in stuff where none of the guys in the band actually played at all, but they went through all the video discs and appeared here and there and played to tape. But everything is, what you see on television is a show. It's show business. It's show business. It's not real. Even exposés on something's not real either, including how bad the band is or how drunk they got last night or who dived out at the second floor in the swimming pool. That's all stage stuff. They use stuntmen, things like that, and written in advance. I mean, you wouldn't believe how it's all show business. All of it, yeah.
The Cockney accent thing is interesting because I've seen videos of Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin and Mick Jagger from the Stones when they were both in secondary school, and they sounded like Prince William. A few years later, they're all, me and Kate down the East End, you know, we were giving it up large and all. This is like Mockney kind of thing going on. I mean, again, there's so many examples that even the classical violinist Nigel Kennedy, who they made a kind of a pop star out of back in the 80s and 90s, I've seen he does the same thing. I'm Nigel Kennedy, I play the violin, this kind of thing. And there are also interviews of him when he was a kid, and he sounds like Prince Harry or Prince William.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I've met the Stones because they were in the same recording studio as I was at one point up in Scotland. Actually, David Balfe ran it, and he'd had hits himself. I mean, he came from a long lineage of cultural experts, believe you me, in this industry. And he had about 3 or 4 different names, and that's the first thing you learn, is use different names. But they were going in at the time, and I had a chat with them, and you're exactly right on how they actually speak in reality. And same with most other ones as well. Yeah. Yeah. And I've met Jimmy Page too in his house when he got it up in Scotland. I had a big party there for different people, and all went, and that was Aleister Crowley's old house, in fact. Yeah.
Old Skid Manor, yeah.
Yeah. I've heard you mention, Alan, that you were invited to a women's event, like a women's lib event or something, and they approached you to do certain songs in a certain way or something.
No, it was actually just. I thought it was just a club in Toronto that I just popped in. I didn't know what it was. I thought I'd go and get a beer actually, and there were some guys singing up on the stage and so on in a small club, and maybe a couple of hundred people. And I thought it was just a local thing, and someone says to me, "Can you play?" I said, a little bit. I always say a little bit. And he said, "Could you give us a song?" So I went up there and sung some of the songs and so on. And this woman approached me and says, "Can you sing something radical?" I says, "Well, what do you mean radical? What kind of radical song? And what would you say is radical? How would you define it?" And it was all anti-establishment stuff. And the place was called the Trojan Horse. Now, there are different Trojan horses, interesting name too, all set up by the Canadian government and funded by the Canadian government for counterculture. And the people who were set up to help run it had to try and pick people to turn up at different rallies and things and do really radical anti-establishment songs paid by your government, for goodness sake. And I was rather astonished at that. And when I was there, I turned up a second night, about a week later, And there's a woman from the federal government who worked for the federal government, came in, they all knew her. She was lesbian, by the way, because she hugged every female there in a strange way. And one of them told me that she was. And I thought, what the hell is this? And the US tax, the Canadian taxpayer was funding all of this, and then all across Canada, these kind of clubs. Britain had the same in some areas too, by the way. I had to find out when I was really young why every government since World War II, the Soviets, France, Britain, Germany, all the countries, the US, Canada, Australia, why we all had a Department of Culture. If you, the people, are the culture, why would you need a Department of Culture? Well, this was for culture guidance and creation. And they give out the grants to novelists, to film producers, film writers, musicians, songwriters. They put out the grants for guys often who couldn't get a job anywhere else because they got a chip in their shoulder or something. But they'll put them out there as long as you put these things in your novel, these topics, update like a computer program, the new morality of the public, and put it in even cartoons. You'd be surprised. You've got your state and U.S. state ones, Canadian provincial ones. They get the grants out too. They call them to artist grants, and so do the federal governments as well. They all do this. So all of culture is actually guided, if it's to be successful, that is, because you can only be allowed to be successful.
Yeah, I know. There's a club in London that does all this kind of thing. There's a club in London. I was going to come back to you, Thomas, on this one. I know there's a club in London that runs these kind of events with musicians or comedians or whatever, and it's run by like the likes of Charlie Skelton and these kind of people who are supposedly at Bilderberg protesting, all run by the Guardian newspaper. But are there any such venues in Dublin or Ireland in general, Thomas?
Well, it's the same as anywhere else. There's even a rock and roll high school here where kids the government get it's like a Juilliard kind of thing, and they put them into they teach them what they expect of them in the music business, and like nobody comes out of it famous or interesting. It's the same idea again. They're programmed and to be rock and rollers as long as they're doing what the teachers, who are all like professors and very few of them have musical backgrounds, are telling them to do. It goes on everywhere. I'm aware of nothing. The music industry here is dead now, really, compared to what it used to be when I was a kid. It was much more organic and natural here years ago. But nowadays, it's just as horrible and commercial as everywhere else. And again, it's the same thing. It's one constant I mentioned at the beginning there about a constant that I'd encountered in this is that it's always well-to-do people from old families, old money families, aristocrats. And it always seems to come back to protecting them through this weird kind of dissociative idea of bringing in Marxism and so on. And yeah, it's been like it's the same. The people who run the music business here, they're all rich. They're all people with money, and I've seen it all my life, and that'll never change. Even the people you've got a much better chance of making it in the music business if your parents are billionaires. Yeah, like Carly Simon, she came from the Simon and Schuster publishing family, and there's so much of this goes on, just like Jim Morrison, because these people come from the families, and it's already known what's expected of them when they get into power, so they don't have to be trained. I often found it very interesting how even in the 60s in England, when you had all these bands first making it, everyone from the Small Faces to the Kinks, how they all bought stately homes of the aristocrats in the countryside. Basically what they were doing was ploughing that money back into the aristocrats. So if they were someone from a working class person from the East End of London, say someone like Steve Marriott from the Small Faces, it was almost like they were expected to purchase with their millions a home, a stately home, a mansion in the countryside from some lord or lady. So immediately you had a transference of cash from the elite into a working class person, but then they were expected to transfer that money back into the elite again. It always goes back to this kind of like aristocratic subculture pulling all the strings.
Alan?
Yeah, that's pretty well how it is. You'll find, though, that in the early 1900s, that's when the big push was on from within the US to destroy all culture. It was quite open in New York. In fact, if you can go and get hundreds of books published by the US Communist Party based in New York City. They published all the books, they republished all the Lenin books and so on, Stalin and various, all these different, right to the very end, and got away with it too. No one came down on them and says that you can't do this or it's going a bit too far. Supposedly advocating revolution to destroy your entire culture and way of life. That's what it was about. To destroy your culture and way of life. All culture and everything to do with culture had to be destroyed and then remade in a new image. And so they came out with the nouveau art at the time, the early art, which was like the Picasso stuff, the schizophrenic faces that are torn in half and things, an eyeball at the top and one in the chin. And they called this art. And here's a technique that they used. They already had the clique at the top of cultural leaders who owned the art industry. And once again, some guy who's called an expert says that, this is a fantastic, creative work of art, worth millions, you see. And it's a piece of rubbish. The king has no clothes idea. But because it's someone so wealthy and talks in his very posh accent and all that, then he must be quite right. So you look at this thing upside down, you stand your head and try to look at it too, and you say, well, I guess you're just not seeing what he's trying to portray there. Nonsense like that. Well, the Guggenheim Foundation or family started to buy all this stuff up to make it popular. Big part of the U.S. culture. And today they still fund it all too, buying this rubbish and promoting this as the greatest art ever made. Everything that was dissociative, disjointive of culture, morality, even sanity itself was pushed out there as the best that we have. All the old paintings that give you a nostalgic, emotional feeling or something of beauty had to be destroyed, and that went along with movies now too. You see how debased they all are. You wouldn't want to live in some of these movies, the places they show you, because they're so debased and they cuss and swear and it's just the F word every second sentence. But that's what they've been pushing. And then the music thing too, you take you right down to rap, and at the very end of when you've taken it all down, you wrap it up, and that's why they called it rap.
Thomas, we've already actually gone 20 minutes over what we were supposed to do, so I don't know if you guys want to carry on a bit more. I suppose that the obvious question is what's coming next. I mean, where do you see the music going now? Thomas?
Well, I think the music industry is basically dead in terms of actual anyone from the bottom trying to make a living from it, because the record companies don't put money into bands anymore. They deliberately create that free download thing in order to sort of take the economic power out of up-and-coming bands, giving them an impetus to try and make it. And the only money that's in the music industry now is that our out acts that are picked through the shows like American Idol and all the other rubbish, and they're put out there. They're the only ones given the promotional budgets. The days of the singer who actually, or the band who came up from the bottom, got a record deal and whatever, as bad as that system was, there was still a chance to actually progress somehow. That doesn't exist anymore. That whole economic aspect has been taken out. The future, as far as I can see, is that the music has become appalling. It's unlistenable now, and I know it's not my age, because I've been listening to all kinds of experimental music all my life, and I'm not like closed-minded or locked into one kind of sound. I'm very open-minded musically. The music that you hear on the radio these days is just bizarre. It's just repetitive sounds and tones repeated over and over again. There's often no melody or harmony. There's no hook. It sounds schizophrenic. In fact, it's almost like designed to make people schizophrenic. So in terms of the music industry, it's gone. It's always been a disaster, but it's finished now. There'll always be people and that will want to create from their heart or from their soul. We'll never hear from them. They'll always do it, and hopefully long may that continue. We'll learn instruments and so on. But in terms of actually a bright future for some kind of big music scene, or the day when true talent is allowed to shine, that's never going to happen, because it's more controlled than ever. They didn't have to license music as Plato wanted. All they had to do was take complete and total control over what the musical output was and filter everything. And they've been doing that for so long now that I can't. What's next? What's next is more drivel, more trash, and hopefully as a counter insurgency to that, more young people who say this. It's clearly garbage. It's clearly controlled. My friends and I are going to make our own music, sing our own songs, and follow our own path. So there's good and bad. But in terms of the music industry, I don't think I think, imagine the worst. We're going, they're always going to push for the worst. We're on as this civilization continues to deteriorate, we will go the way of Rome. And when Rome first began, the Colosseum used to host basically boxing matches and poetry recitals and plays. Towards the end, they were having, people with Down syndrome being torn apart by wild animals. Well, I can guarantee you that's eventually where the musical industry will take it. That will be the end game. They will. It's been done before. It'll go increasingly shocking to what we will look back to the days of hardcore gangster rap, and we will think it's innocent and wholesome compared to what's coming down the line.
Alan?
And it's also the end product of a war. It's a war. It's an agenda. And the war was on all of society, not just in one country, but across an awful lot of societies. When it brought out, the Picasso-type nonsense, it was the movement was to make apathy, nihilism, the yuck feeling of nothingness left in you when you looked at this rubbish, nothing of beauty to look at, etc. So the beauty that makes you human and all the emotions that go with it, that also add to the culture that gave you your culture in the past, have been pretty well annihilated until you had this lost sound and young lost voices almost wailing. Again, narcissistically, it's not for us or we all share this or whatever in common. It's to do with bringing in a narcissistic I am me, exactly what Bertrand Russell and others talked about. They would bring in, they've done it awfully successfully. You're not really connected with other people. Right down with the internet war, the texting, they'd rather text each other at the table rather than talk to each other. It's all worked superbly well, And whatever they want in culture is promoted from the top as being, you got to do this if you want to be in the in crowd. If you don't do this, you're not in the in crowd. So if you sit and still talk across the table at a restaurant or whatever, you're square, you're odd, you're weirdo. Text each other, you're in the in crowd. It's been awfully successful, unfortunately, this whole war. And unfortunately, when you've lost so much and folk cannot relate to anything that made you strong in the past, that gave every generation a vision of hope and prosperity or whatever it happened to be, then you're in a state of apathy, like the sci-fi movies that started churning out about the future back in the 70s, 80s and 90s. You're living amongst rubble of a depressed economy, everything's gone, living in rubble. You have this private global army that's bashing the head all the time or killing you, because they're the winners. They can always hire the hoods to be in the military in such a system. That's what they've been projecting for years, and really that's what they want, I think. When you look at the big think tank for NATO that did the report, and I put it up on my website at cuttingthroughmatrix.com in the archive section, 90 pages they came out with for the NATO countries and the British military. This is the big think tank that projects the future of what's coming down. They're going to turn the world eventually into city-states, no more countries. And these will be privately owned city-states by a very rich elite run by, on behalf of the elite, you have the scientific, the expert-run community society. In the meantime, you'll have what Huxley talks about in Brave New World. You'll have the kind of barbarians living outside the gates, living in the rubble of what used to be rural areas and all the rest of it. But they'll die off over the years until they're all gone. That's what they also portrayed in so many movies that also coincided with the kind of debased, degenerative, nihilistic music they've been throwing out there for years. It all comes together at this time. And they want the new financial system to be brought in eventually through another big crash, which is all organized, of course, by one group of banks that run the world. The World Bank, set up by the private organization, Royal Institute for International Affairs. They set up the IMF. They own that too. They own the world's money supply, basically, and the lending supply. So they're going to bring in a new system, very degenerate, because the future is for a much smaller population of those they deem fit to go through it, not all those who presently exist and have the right, by being born here, to have the same rights as everybody else. They don't believe in that at all. They're very eugenically orientated. And if you look at the real Trotskyist Marxist type that they keep calling themselves now, it's the same eugenics elitist movement as the wealthy financial elite already had. It's one and the same thing. There are no sides in this. There's only one monopoly for the world monopoly.
Yeah, I've heard quite a few lyrics over the past decade, I suppose, talking about too many people and all this kind of stuff. I think of New Model Army. I mean, they talk about this kind of stuff. People starving because there's too many of them and all this garbage. Thomas, the final word to yourself?
I can't really think of much more to say. I think we've covered it comprehensively. Well, I'm just glad that, for me the biggest dilemma is I'm a music fan and I love music, okay? But I also, I don't buy into the pop star, rock star thing. If I hear a piece of music, I like it, I will like it. If I hear a band, I don't really care. I've been fortunate that I've never been really influenced by the lyrics. To me, it was just a nice guitar sound or a nice drum sound. That was enough for me. So I think for those of us, we should, enjoy music if it makes you feel good. Enjoy it if you like the sound. But always remember that you don't have to buy into the whole package. You can just take it what you hear, what you like, and discard the rest, because the rest is probably what the good music is a lure and a bait to get you into the control system, and that's what they're after. Don't take the lure, don't take the bait. Just enjoy it for what it is and detach. And that to me is what I would say is the best way to deal with that.
I know you're still playing, Thomas, and Alan, I heard you say at Christmas you hadn't picked a guitar up for a year, so I hope you do this year sometime, and we'll get a tune out of you at Christmas again.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, thanks very much, guys, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime on a completely different topic. We'll leave it at that.